Here are the top stories for today, August 26, 2020. The National Task Force Against COVID-19 hails Congress for acting on measures needed to mitigate the effects of the pandemic. Malacanang says President Duterte may consider implementing martial law in Sulu following the twin bombings in Jolo. Senator Bongo calls for the prompt and successful implementation of the national ID system. And Presidential Peace Advisor Carlito Galvez Jr. and foreign officials condemn the bombings in Jolo, Sulu. Good day, I'm William Theo. Welcome to the PNA Newsroom. PhilHealth President and CEO Ricardo Morales said he is following the advice of President Rodrigo Duterte to resign due to his unstable health condition. Meanwhile, PhilHealth Senior Vice President for Legal Sector Rodolfo Del Rosario Jr. has tendered his resignation amid allegations of corruption. More on this from Rodolfo.
Heeding the advice of President Duterte, retired General Ricardo Morales is resigning as President and CEO of PhilHealth. Morales' decision to resign from his post comes after Justice Secretary Bernardo Guevara disclosed that it would be best for him to quit as per President Duterte. Guevara says President Duterte took note of Morales' on and off health situation and stated that it would be best for the latter and for PhilHealth to give up his post during these critical times for the agency. Morales earlier filed for medical leave as he had been undergoing chemotherapy for lymphoma. 2 days later, he suddenly left a House probe on PhilHealth issues, citing his medical condition. Meanwhile, PhilHealth Senior Vice President for Legal Sector Rodolfo Del Rosario Jr. has tendered his resignation amid the ongoing investigations. Del Rosario said he resigned on Monday following the decision of Ombudsman Samuel Martires earlier this month to place him under a 6-month preventive suspension without pay. He said he cannot afford to be unemployed for the next 6 months and the corporation would need an SVP legal in these trying times. Del Rosario was named by Senator Panfilo Lacson as among the PhilHealth officials who are said to have been manipulating the financial records of PhilHealth through a deeply rooted mafia syndicate. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Rodolfo.
Top government officials thanked both houses of Congress for ratifying the proposed Bayanihan to Recover as One Act. They say recognizing the urgent measures and programs mitigates the impact of the health crisis. Defense Secretary Delfin Lorenzana, chair of the National Task Force Against COVID-19, said the swift action of Congress is a testament to the whole-of-nation approach needed to combat the dreaded coronavirus disease 2019. Meanwhile, Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr. said the measure is vital in boosting government plans and strategies to halt the spread of the disease. Galvez said the second phase of the National Action Plan on COVID-19 is anchored on the prevent, detect, isolate, treat, reintegrate strategy of the government. Deputy Chief Implementer Secretary Vince Dizon said the measure has allocated a standby fund amounting to 10 billion pesos, which would be used for COVID-19 testing efforts, as well as on the procurement of various medications and vaccines. The government is targeting to test a total of 10 million Filipinos by June next year. Presidential Communications Operations Office, or PCOO, reiterates the importance of the proposed Bayanihan to Recover as One Act, or Bayanihan 2, saying this would allow the government to step up in its fight against COVID-19. PCOO Secretary Martin Endenar said the needed and timely COVID-19 response can be further realized once the proposed Bayanihan 2 is passed into law. The Senate ratified the reconciled Bayanihan 2 bill, which authorizes Duterte to realign funds for the COVID-19 pandemic. The House of Representatives also approved a similar measure. Andanar thanked the senators and congressmen for ratifying the bill, saying the country is now truly on track to heal and recover as one nation. Meanwhile, Chief Presidential Legal Counsel Salvador Panelo urged the opposition led by Vice President Maria Leonor Robredo to help the government in its battle against COVID-19 rather than criticize its way of handling the pandemic. Panelo said the Duterte administration is already monitoring the issues Robredo had raised. Over 1,300 public utility jeepneys are allowed to operate with the opening of 23 more new routes. The Land Transportation Franchising and Regulatory Board said traditional jeepneys can operate in these routes even without special permits, but they should have their QR codes displayed on their units. The following are the 23 new routes. PUV drivers and operators are urged to observe the minimum health protocols set by the Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases, including the wearing of face masks and face shields and the observance of social distancing. Drivers and operators must first download and print the special quick response code that should be displayed on their vehicles. Filipino businessman Ramon R.J. Jacinto has been formally sworn in as an Undersecretary of the Department of Information and Communications Technology. Jacinto has been appointed as the Undersecretary for Government Digital Broadcast Television and the digitalization of the entertainment industry sector. He took his oath via a video conference with DICT Secretary Gregorio Honasan. His responsibilities include assisting government-owned and/or controlled television broadcasting entities, the Presidential Communications Operations Office, and the Department of Education in broadcasting basic education content amid the coronavirus disease pandemic. He is also in charge of assisting the Philippine entertainment industry towards digitalization. Former Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines President and retired Lingayen Dagupan Archbishop Oscar Cruz passed away this morning at the age of 85. According to CBCP, Cruz died at 6:45 a.m. at the Cardinal Santos Hospital due to a lingering illness. Monsignor Pedro Quitorio of the CBCP Media Office said the prelate was rushed to the hospital 2 weeks ago. He said Bishop Cruz had pneumonia in 2017 and his health has been deteriorating since then. Still to come, Malacanang says President Duterte may consider implementing martial law in Sulu following the twin bombings in Jolo. Senator Bongo calls for the prompt and successful implementation of the national ID system. More on these when the PNA Newsroom continues.
Alamin ang tamang paraan ng pag-ubo upang mapigilan ang paglaganap ng Coronavirus Disease 2019. Ugaliing magdala ng panyo o tissue. Kung uubo o babahing, takpan ang buong ilong at bibig gamit ang panyo o tissue. Kung walang dalang panyo o tissue, maaaring gamitin ang braso na pantakip. Kung nakararamdam na kailangan umubo o bumahing, agad na dumistansya sa mga tao sa paligid. Huwag dumura kung saan-saan, gumamit ng tissue at itapon sa basurahan. Ugaliin ang paghuhugas ng kamay at paggamit ng alcohol o hand sanitizer upang mamatay ang mikrobyo. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa, kaya natin to! Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito.
The entire Sulu province may be placed under martial law following the recent deadly twin blast that rocked its capital town, Jolo. The twin explosions in Jolo left at least 15 people, including 7 soldiers and a police officer, dead and 77 others wounded. The attacks were reportedly carried out by 2 Abu Sayyaf group suicide bombers. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said the president has already received the recommendation and he listens to those on the ground. Section 18, Article 7 of the 1987 Constitution states that a president can declare martial law and suspend the writ of habeas corpus for a period not exceeding 60 days in case of invasion or rebellion. It also provides that such proclamation of martial law or suspension of the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus can either be revoked or extended for a period determined by Congress through joint voting. Roque said Duterte needs to be very careful in assessing the recommendation because there should be a legal and factual basis to declare martial rule in Sulu. He guaranteed that victims of the twin explosions would receive assistance from the government. Senator Christopher Lawrence Bongo urges the Philippine Statistics Authority to implement the Philippine Identification System, or PhilSys, promptly and successfully. The national ID system aims to prevent fraudulent transactions and misrepresentations. Senator Go said the national ID system is long overdue. The ongoing pandemic exposed many gaps in the delivery of various services. One example is the Social Amelioration Program, which initially encountered distribution challenges. The discrepancy in some data would have been minimized if we had the national ID system fully functional. He added that PhilSys would further improve efficiency, transparency, and responsiveness in future deliveries of essential government services. Corruption, enhance transparency, provide safe and convenient delivery of services to the people, and encourage citizen feedback and participation in governance, Go said. Meanwhile, the Philippine Statistics Authority, or PSA, in Zamboanga City says it is ready for the 2020 Census of Population and Housing starting September 1 to 29. At least 949 individuals were hired as enumerators, and they already underwent training. The enumerators will go house to house in all 98 barangays, and they will be given personal protective equipment, or PPEs. Hundreds of job seekers took the chance to get employment amid the COVID-19 pandemic at a job fair in Lawag City. More on this and other news from the provinces from Chris Mundo.
Hundreds of applicants, mostly returning residents and fresh graduates, lined up on a rainy Tuesday at the Ilocos Norte Centennial Arena to apply for a job amid the COVID-19 crisis. The job fair, entitled Naruay Apanggedan, which means more jobs, aimed to provide opportunities to returning overseas workers and locally stranded individuals. To ensure that physical distancing and minimum health standards were observed, the Provincial Employment Service Office required applicants to pre-register online and wait for their time to be called for interview. Over 700 applicants were able to pre-register online. In Pangasinan, the Philippine Coconut Authority is set to open a regional office that will cover the Cordillera Administrative Region, Ilocos, Cagayan Valley, and Central Luzon. PCA Ilocos Regional Head Dennis Andres said with the regional office, they would be able to focus on the coconut industry in the province. Andres said PCA's mission in Regions 1, 2, 3, and CAR is to promote the planting of coconuts and also advance it as an important economic and valuable industry which will address food security. Meantime, Andres said there are a lot of local government units, associations, and private groups from the regions who are working for the propagation of short-term maturity coconuts, such as Takunan and Katigan varieties, which start to bear fruits in 2 to 3 years. Meanwhile, Davao City Mayor Sara Duterte renewed her call to Davaoenos to observe the minimum health measures to prevent the spread of COVID-19 after a patient contracted the virus at a wedding party. Duterte slammed members of prominent families here after holding a grand wedding celebration recently, where a guest later tested positive for COVID-19. Duterte said she has constantly reminded wedding organizers that holding big events would be very risky. She earlier ordered a period of mourning and vigilance from April 17 until December 31 amid the pandemic. Mayor Duterte also called on Davaoenos to be vigilant and practice the culture of security at all times following the twin blasts in Jolo, Sulu. She said for years, the city has been boosting its security and anti-terrorism initiatives to encourage Davaoenos to adopt vigilance in their way of life. The mayor also hopes the recently enacted anti-terrorism law would address similar incidents and give justice to the victims. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Chris Mundo.
In our business news, the National Economic and Development Authority says the government is continuously working on programs that would help affected sectors to cope with the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. Acting Socio-Economic Planning Secretary Carlito said the government's recovery program comprises the Bayanihan to Recover as One Act or Bayanihan 2, the Build program, and the 2021 budget. Under the government's phased and adaptive recovery approach, 655 billion pesos has been allocated to help people cope with the pandemic and improve the country's healthcare system. This includes the ramped-up spending to protect some 18 million low-income households and 3.1 million workers of small businesses. He added that the government will also provide equity support to distressed firms and that are deemed strategic and allow banks to dispose of bad loans and assets so they can serve more businesses. Chua also said the government is focusing on enhancing the productivity of the agricultural sector as it plays a crucial role in economic recovery. Up next, Presidential Peace Advisor Carlito Galvez Jr. and foreign officials condemn the bombings in Sulu. And a grade 2 student goes viral for taking online classes in a treehouse. The PNA Newsroom returns after these reminders.
Sa matinding laban natin sa Coronavirus Disease 2019, sugpuin din natin ang pagkalat ng fake news. Huwag magbahagi ng impormasyon na hindi tiyak ang pinagmulan. I-check mabuti ang source ng balita. Kumuha lamang ng impormasyon mula sa mga official channel ng Department of Health. Huwag magpadala sa maling balita, basta't sama-sama at laging handa. Kaya natin to. Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito.
Senators cited anew the need for a strong anti-terrorism law amid continued condemnation of the bombings that killed at least 14 people in Sulu. More on this from Marita Mawahe.
Presidential Peace Advisor Carlito Galvez Jr. has condemned the twin blasts in Sulu that killed at least 14 people and wounded 77 others on Monday. Galvez, also the chief implementer of the government's pandemic response, lamented the incident that happened amid the country's efforts to weather the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic. Galvez urged everyone to remain calm but vigilant as authorities thoroughly investigate the incident. He said the bombings would not deter the country from achieving its goal to break the cycle of violence in Sulu and bring lasting peace to the island province. Meanwhile, Senator Ronald De La Rosa said the deadly bombings in Sulu is the answer to those criticizing the timing of the passage of the Republic Act 11479 or the Anti-Terrorism Act of 2020. He said the bombings also serve as challenge to all human rights advocates, including the Commission on Human Rights, to condemn the terroristic attacks and focus on the sufferings and sacrifices of uniformed personnel for their countrymen. For his part, Senator Bongo reiterated this call on all agencies of government to ensure that those responsible to these acts of terrorism are held accountable for their actions. Senator Panfilo Lacson also called for the implementation of the anti-terrorism law in order for security forces to better address terrorism in Mindanao and the rest of the country. In other news, several U.S. senators on Tuesday vowed to support the cooperation between Manila and Washington on counterterrorism in the wake of the bombings in Sulu. U.S. Senators Jim Risch and Bob Menendez of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, along with Senators Jim Inhofe and Jack Reed of the Senate Armed Service Committee, sent condolences to the kin of those killed in the twin attacks reportedly carried out by two Abu Sayyaf group suicide bombers. In Manila, U.S. Ambassador to the Philippines Sung Kim also condoled with the bereaved families. She deplored the terror attack. The European Union, the Chinese Embassy in Manila, Russian Ambassador Igor Kovaev, and British Ambassador to the Philippines, Daniel Cruz, also joined the Philippines in denouncing the act that resulted in multiple Philippine military and civilian casualties. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Marita Muaje.
Several transport cooperatives in Northern Mindanao that have switched to modern public utility vehicles are only waiting for the Land Bank of the Philippines to release their loans before they can start operations. Once their loan applications are approved and released, the transport cooperatives can immediately place their orders with PUV manufacturers. LTFRB 10 Director Aminoden Guro sees more modernized PUVs will ply the various routes in the region before the year ends. The PUVs include public utility jeepneys, taxis, and vans made in line with the national government's PUV modernization program. Under the PUV modernization program, drivers who will be receiving monthly salaries based on records from the Office of Transportation Cooperatives. Northern Mindanao has 51 transport cooperatives, most of them based in Misamis Oriental, particularly in Cagayan de Oro. The Negros Occidental Police Provincial Office is raising funds through the contribution of its personnel to assist colleagues who have tested positive for COVID-19. Negros Occidental Police Director Colonel Romeo Palgue said that personnel are raising funds from their voluntary contributions. 3 Negrense police officers who are among those assigned to secure the quarantine facilities for returning Negrenses have contracted COVID-19. 2 of the infected cops have recovered. Palgue added that the NOC-PPO would also hold the first Shoot for Peace Barilan para sa Kapayapaan tournament to generate more funds for cash incentives and food items. Palgue, meanwhile, thanked the local government units in Negros Occidental for their continued support for the PNP. He exhorted provincial personnel to never falter in serving the people amid the challenges brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. 4 emergency animal shelters in Ilocos Norte are ready to host distressed animals during bad weather. Provincial veterinarian Dr. Loida Valenzuela said the towns of Dingras, Solsona, Curimao, and Badoc have already established their animal shelters in time for the rainy season. The 4 municipalities had been selected as the pioneering beneficiaries as they are prone to flooding, which leads to animal death. Some 8.7 million pesos from the province's share of tobacco excise tax would be used to house farm animals and other livestock in case of natural calamities such as typhoons and floods. Animal feed, water, and vitamins will also be made available at the shelter. To help farmers cope from their losses due to natural calamities, the Department of Agriculture will continue to provide livelihood assistance to the marginalized sector. As the new school year opens amid the COVID-19 pandemic, a youth council in Lanao del Norte started offering tutorials to help children with their studies. Christine Linviajante has the story.
Members of a youth council in the municipality of Bacolod in Lanao del Norte have stepped up efforts to ensure kids in their barangay continue their education amid the coronavirus disease pandemic. Youth volunteers offer free tutorial classes to 100 preschool to grade 6 children in Barangay Mate.
Ang SK Quarantine Program po ng aming Sangguniang Kabataan Barangay Mate, nag-initiate ang Sangguniang Kabataan dahil hindi lahat ng mga magulang makaturo sa kanilang mga bata. Wala na silang oras sa kanilang mga anak. Ang mga Sangguniang Kabataan volunteers po, ma'am. Sila po yung nagtuturo.
Meanwhile, 55-year-old Dina Reyes expressed appreciation for the initiative of the Sangguniang Kabataan. Reyes' daughter Riza was one of the grade 5 pupils who participated in the tutorial class.
Manghinaot ko nga ang mga SK magpadayon o hantod sa ilahang pagkahuman sa ilang termino. Daghat kayong salamat sa amuang SK.
Furthermore, the SK Council used materials downloaded from the learning platform of the Department of Education in coordination with the schools in their community. For PNA Newsroom, Christine Linviajante of PIA Iligan City Information Center.
Grade 2 student Arvin J. Kurang-kurang from Barangay Kabatang, Alicia, Bohol went viral on social media for making things possible amid the pandemic. Arvin's aunt, Giselle Marie Kurang-kurang, posted photos of Arvin seemingly enjoying his online class under a treehouse built on a hill. Since his classes started on August 3, Arvin has been attending the modular learning mode with Giselle as his guardian. Giselle decided to find a place where a steady internet signal could allow Arvin to attend an online class instead. She soon found a spot in the middle of a hill with a 4G internet signal. Arvin's grandfather built the treehouse on a hill so it could serve as a classroom during his virtual class sessions. Arvin's teacher, Maria Janen Palma Asino, lauded his determination to attend school activities no matter what challenges get through him. Here's another look at today's biggest stories. The National Task Force Against COVID-19 hails Congress for acting on measures needed to mitigate the effects of the pandemic. Malacanang says President Duterte may consider implementing martial law in Sulu following the twin bombings in Jolo. Senator Bongo calls for the prompt and successful implementation of the national ID system. And Presidential Peace Advisor Carlito, Galvez Jr. and foreign officials condemn the bombings in Jolo, Sulu. Thank you for watching another episode of the PNA Newsroom. To check out more news content, check our webpage or head onto the Philippine News Agency's Facebook and Twitter accounts. For more stories about the government and how it serves Filipinos, look for these hashtags in all of our social media platforms and websites. We are shown on the pages of the PCOO and its attached agencies. Also, watch us on television on PTV4 and IBC 13. And that's your daily dose of the biggest stories that you need to know. From the PNA Newsroom, I am William Theo. Good day and stay safe, everyone.